The first thing you notice in courtroom 4B isn't the judge's bench or the flags or the polished wood. It's the way power sits in the room like it owns the air. Ethan Hart sat at the defense table, like the courtroom was his private boardroom. Tailored suit, cufflinks catching the light, jaw relaxed in that careless way men get when they think they've already won. His attorney, Victor Crane, leaned in close, whispering like a man setting the final piece on a chessboard. And then there was Claire Hart. No attorney beside her, no stack of folders arranged like a fortress. Just a single woman in a plain navy dress, hair pulled back, hands folded neatly as if she'd come to listen to someone else's fate being decided. Except the name on the docket was hers. Before we step into what happened next, because trust me, you're going to want to see how this ends, make sure you hit like if you enjoy intense courtroom stories and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. These cases always start with someone underestimated and end with someone exposed. The bailiff called the room to order, and the chatter in the gallery faded to a tense hush. People were packed shoulder to shoulder. Curious neighbors, a couple of reporters, a woman in a bright red blazer whispering into her phone. Everyone had heard the rumor. Ethan Hart, the rising real estate genius, was about to crush his soon-to-be ex-wife in open court. The judge, Marlene Ortiz, entered with a presence that didn't need noise. She sat, eyes scanning both tables, and her gaze paused just a beat longer on Claire sitting alone. Case number 22-4117, the judge said. Hart versus Hart. Divorce proceedings, division of marital assets, and spousal support. Victor Crane rose smoothly. Your Honor, we're prepared to proceed. Claire stood when it was her turn. Her voice was steady. So am I, Your Honor. Ethan didn't look at her. He looked past her like she was a mistake the court hadn't erased yet. Judge Ortiz adjusted her glasses. Mrs. Hart, I understand you are representing yourself. Yes, ma'am. Very well, Mr. Crane, you may begin. Victor Crane turned toward the jury box, even though there wasn't a jury. Old habits of performance. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Mr. Hart built his success through hard work. Mrs. Hart benefited from it, and now she seeks to walk away with more than she contributed. Ethan's lips curved into a smirk so small it was almost polite. Almost. Crane continued, voice dripping with practiced sympathy. But today we will show the truth, and we will ask this court to deny unreasonable demands, award the marital home to Mr. Hart, and, given Mrs. Hart's refusal to pursue gainful employment. Claire's eyebrows flickered at that, the smallest crack in her calm. Crane glanced at her like he'd caught her breathing wrong. We will also ask that any request for alimony be either denied or significantly limited. The word alimony hovered in the air like bait. Judge Ortiz looked to Claire. Mrs. Hart, are you requesting spousal support? Claire didn't hesitate. No, Your Honor. For a moment, the courtroom didn't react, like the room needed a second to understand what it had just heard. Then Ethan laughed. Not a chuckle, not a nervous sound. A real laugh, sharp, loud, arrogant, like Claire had just told the funniest joke he'd heard all year. Victor Crane's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't stop it. He let it land. Ethan leaned back in his chair, voice loud enough for the gallery. Of course she's not. She can't even afford to ask. Claire stared at him, and the calm on her face didn't change. But the air did. Judge Ortiz's gavel tapped once. Mr. Hart, control yourself. Ethan gave a mock apology. My mistake, Your Honor. And still that smile stayed, because he believed this was the beginning of Claire's public humiliation. He had no idea it was the beginning of his. Victor Crane moved forward like a man presenting a charity case. Your Honor, Mrs. Hart wants to appear noble today. She wants to pretend she's refusing alimony out of pride, but we all know what's happening. He turned to Claire. Isn't it true, Mrs. Hart, that you have no independent income? Claire's voice remained even. I have income. Crane's smile widened. A part-time counseling position at a community clinic, correct? What do you make, $35,000 a year? 40. Claire didn't flinch. Enough. Ethan snorted softly, as if enough was the funniest word in the English language. Crane pounced. Enough for what, Mrs. Hart? Enough to keep up the lifestyle you enjoyed while married to my client? Enough to maintain the marital home? Enough to pay the bills that come with a property of that size? He turned to Judge Ortiz with the confidence of a man who believes numbers win arguments. Your Honor, the marital home is valued at $1.2 million. The mortgage, taxes, and upkeep are substantial. Mr. Hart has handled these responsibilities for years. Mrs. Hart has not. Claire's fingers tightened once on the edge of her paperwork. She released them just as quickly. Crane continued. Meanwhile, Mr. Hart's career, built through relentless work, has provided for them both. Mrs. Hart chose not to pursue a demanding profession. She chose comfort. Claire lifted her chin. I chose family. That made Ethan finally look at her, eyes cold. You chose hiding behind me, he said. Let's be honest. Judge Ortiz's eyes sharpened. Mr. Hart, speak through counsel. Ethan lifted his hands as if surrendering. Fine, my counsel can say it. She's trying to play victim. Victor Crane didn't miss a beat. Mrs. Hart, during the marriage, you drove a luxury vehicle, paid for by Mr. Hart. You lived in a gated community, paid for by Mr. Hart. You traveled, paid for by Mr. Hart. He let each phrase hit like a slap. And now, Crane said, you sit here without representation. That was your choice too, correct? Claire's voice didn't waver. Yes. Crane tilted his head. Because you can't afford it. Claire looked him in the eye. Because I don't need it. A ripple moved through the gallery. Some people shifted, uncomfortable. Others leaned forward, hungry. Ethan laughed again, quieter this time, like a cruel private joke. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered something that made Crane's mouth twitch with amusement. Judge Ortiz turned her gaze to Claire. Mrs. Hart, the court encourages representation in matters of property and support. Claire nodded respectfully. Understood. Crane pressed on. Let's talk about contribution. In the last 7 years, Mr. Hart's income provided the primary financial support, correct? Claire answered carefully. He had a larger income. Crane smiled. That's not what I asked. Claire's eyes hardened just a fraction. Yes, his income was the primary reported income. Crane's eyebrows rose like he'd caught her trying to sound clever. Reported, he repeated. Interesting choice of word. Ethan's smirk returned. Crane lifted a folder. Your Honor, we will show bank statements, mortgage documents, and financial records proving Mr. Hart paid for the home, paid for the lifestyle, and paid for the very stability Mrs. Hart now pretends she can survive without. He turned toward Claire, voice suddenly soft, almost pitying. Mrs. Hart, refusing alimony doesn't make you strong, it makes you reckless. Ethan finally spoke again, unable to resist. Let her, he said, loud enough for everyone. Let her refuse it. Then let her figure out what it feels like to be broke. Claire's face stayed calm, but her eyes said something else. They said, you have no idea what broke really looks like, and you have no idea who kept you from it. To the people watching, Claire looked like she'd walked into a storm with nothing but an umbrella. But storms didn't scare her, because Claire Hart had been living inside one for years. She met Ethan when he was charming, hungry, ambitious, the kind of man who made you feel like his future included you by default. He told her she was different, that she was safe with him, that he'd build an empire, and she'd never have to worry again. And for a while she believed it. She'd been the steady one, the patient one, the one who held things together while Ethan chased deals and investors and applause. She'd given up opportunities that required travel because Ethan said he needed her close. She'd cut back her hours when he complained she wasn't present enough. And slowly the marriage stopped being a partnership and became a performance. Ethan on stage, Claire in the shadows making sure the lights stayed on. The betrayal didn't start with another woman. It started with the way Ethan began speaking to her like she was furniture. Useful, silent, replaceable. Then came the late nights, the business trips, the scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts dismissed with a laugh. When Claire finally confronted him months ago, he didn't even deny it. He sighed like she'd bored him. You wouldn't understand, he said. You live in feelings, I live in reality. Then he filed for divorce. And he didn't just want to leave. He wanted to win. In court, Victor Crane called Ethan as the first witness. Ethan rose with a practiced confidence, took the stand and swore to tell the truth. He placed a hand over his heart, like sincerity was something you could borrow for a moment. Crane's voice was warm. Mr. Hart, can you describe your role in providing for the household? Ethan nodded. I worked hard. I built my company from nothing. I paid the bills, the mortgage, the insurance. Claire had a comfortable life. Crane asked, did Mrs. Hart contribute financially to the marital home? Ethan's eyes slid toward Claire and his smile sharpened. Not in any meaningful way. Claire didn't interrupt. She didn't react. She just watched him bury himself one confident sentence at a time. Crane held up a document. This is the mortgage statement for the marital home, whose name appears as the borrower. Ethan leaned forward. Mine. Crane turned to the judge. And whose account has been used to make payments? Ethan answered quickly, mine. Then he added, for the benefit of the room, obviously. The gallery murmured, sympathetic to the image he painted. Powerful man dragged down by an ungrateful wife. Ethan continued, warming to the attention. I gave Claire everything, and when she found out I was moving on, she decided to punish me. That's what this is. Claire's jaw tightened slightly. Crane asked, how did Mrs. Hart respond when you filed for divorce? Ethan scoffed. She panicked. She tried to guilt me. Said she sacrificed everything, but that's what spouses do, right? Support. She's acting like she deserves a trophy for being present. He let the insult hang. Crane nodded gravely. And now she refuses alimony. Ethan laughed on the stand. Because she knows she doesn't deserve it, or because she wants to pretend she's not desperate. Either way, it's pathetic. Judge Ortiz's gaze was icy. Mr. Hart, keep your language respectful. Ethan gave a shallow nod. Yes, Your Honor. But the disrespect stayed in his tone, in his posture, in the way he looked at Claire like she was the smallest person he'd ever had to deal with. Crane moved closer to the stand. Mr. Hart, what are you asking this court to award you? Ethan didn't blink. The house, my company assets, the accounts I funded. I want a clean break. Crane asked softly, and what should Mrs. Hart receive? Ethan's answer came like a verdict. What she earned. He glanced at her. Nothing. A hush fell, heavy, satisfied, cruel, and Claire sat there alone at her table, like she'd just been sentenced in public. Except the truth was, Claire wasn't alone. Not really. Not when she had something Ethan never bothered to learn about her. Patience. Victor Crane guided Ethan through more testimony, each question sharpening the blade. Mr. Hart, Crane said, did you ever ask Mrs. Hart to contribute to the mortgage payments? Ethan spread his hands. She couldn't. I didn't marry her for her money. The gallery chuckled softly, the way people do when cruelty is wrapped in charm. Crane continued, Your Honor, we have evidence that Mr. Hart maintained the home financially. He also covered marital debts, including credit cards used predominantly by Mrs. Hart. He held up another file. Mrs. Hart's spending patterns were... Claire interrupted calmly. Objection. The courtroom froze for a second. A self-represented objection always sounded strange, like a person refusing to be steamrolled. Judge Ortiz looked at her. On what grounds? Claire's voice was steady. Relevance. He's implying spending without showing context of who authorized it and where the money actually came from. Crane smiled, amused. Your Honor, her spending is relevant to whether she contributed. Judge Ortiz nodded slowly. Overruled, but keep it focused, Mr. Crane. Claire sat back down, expression unreadable. Crane kept going. Mr. Hart, during the marriage, did you maintain any separate accounts unknown to Mrs. Hart? Ethan answered smoothly, no. Claire's eyes narrowed, not dramatically, just enough to change the temperature. Crane asked, did Mrs. Hart ever pay the mortgage directly? Ethan let out a small laugh. No. Crane turned toward Claire like he was offering mercy. Mrs. Hart, is that true? Claire didn't hesitate. No. The word landed like a dropped glass. Ethan's head snapped toward her. Victor Crane blinked once, thrown off script. Judge Ortiz leaned forward. Mrs. Hart, clarify. Claire met the judge's gaze. That's not true. A murmur erupted. Confusion, curiosity, skepticism. Ethan laughed louder, because that's what arrogant men do when reality threatens them. Oh my God, he said, she's losing it. Judge Ortiz tapped her gavel. Order. Crane regained his composure and addressed Claire with a patient tone. Mrs. Hart, you're saying you paid the mortgage. Claire replied, I'm saying the mortgage was paid by someone other than Mr. Hart. Ethan rolled his eyes dramatically. Sure, Ghost paid it. Crane's voice stayed smooth, but his eyes sharpened. Do you have proof? Claire nodded. Yes. Crane scoffed lightly. Then why didn't you present it earlier? Claire's answer was quiet. Because you weren't ready to hear it. Ethan leaned forward, face smug. This is what happens when you don't have a lawyer. You start inventing fantasies. Claire looked at him. You invented a whole life. That made Ethan's smile falter for the first time. Crane quickly redirected. Your Honor, we ask the court to disregard speculative claims until evidence is presented. Judge Ortiz nodded. Mrs. Hart, you will have the opportunity to present your case. For now, continue, Mr. Crane. Crane finished his presentation with a flourish. Charts, dates, documents. He painted Ethan as the provider, the builder, the man who carried the weight while Claire lived comfortably. Then he looked at Claire and said almost gently, Mrs. Hart, if you're refusing alimony and you're claiming contributions you can't substantiate, I strongly suggest you reconsider. Claire's eyes didn't leave his. No. Ethan shook his head, smirking like a king watching a peasant refuse a coin. She's going to regret this, he muttered. And maybe she would have, if all she had was pride. But Claire had receipts, and the courtroom was about to learn what it costs to underestimate a woman who spent years quietly saving the man who now wanted to destroy her. When it was finally Claire's turn to speak, she stood slowly like she wanted every movement to show she wasn't afraid. Mrs. Hart, Judge Ortiz said, you may proceed with your questions. Claire walked toward the stand where Ethan still sat, still confident, still smirking like he'd already collected his prize. Claire's voice was calm. Mr. Hart, you testified that the mortgage payments came from your account. Ethan smiled. Correct. Claire nodded. How often did you personally log into the mortgage portal to confirm payments? Ethan blinked. I had automatic payments. Claire didn't react. So you never checked? Ethan scoffed. I didn't need to, I had money. Claire's tone stayed neutral. How often did you review your bank statements line by line? Ethan's eyes narrowed. Claire, are we really doing this? Judge Ortiz's voice cut in. Answer the question, Mr. Hart. Ethan shrugged. I review them sometimes, my accountant handles most of it. Claire nodded again as if that was exactly what she needed. Your accountant. So you personally can't testify that the mortgage payments were initiated by you, only that you assumed they were. Ethan's smile tightened. I assumed because it's my house. Claire tilted her head slightly. Is it? A flicker of irritation ran through Ethan's face. Yes. Claire continued. You also testified that I never paid the mortgage directly. Ethan leaned forward. You didn't. Claire asked, have you ever seen the payment source code on the mortgage servicing statements? The reference identifier that shows where funds originate? Ethan stared at her like she'd started speaking another language. What are you talking about? Claire glanced toward Judge Ortiz. Your Honor, may I approach with Exhibit A? Judge Ortiz's eyes narrowed with interest. You may. Claire walked to the clerk and handed over a neat packet. Not messy, not emotional, organized, intentional. The judge reviewed the top page, then looked up. Mr. Crane, have you seen this exhibit? Crane's smile had faded. Not yet, Your Honor. Ethan's smirk returned, as if he could will the truth away. This is cute, he muttered. She printed something off the internet. Claire returned to her spot and faced Ethan. Mr. Hart, she said, you like to call me weak. Ethan scoffed. I call you unrealistic. Claire nodded. Unrealistic enough to keep you afloat for years without you noticing. Ethan laughed, but it sounded thinner now. You didn't keep anything afloat. Claire didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You told the court you paid the mortgage. Ethan snapped, because I did. Claire asked, then why does the servicing statement list the payer as Larkspur Holdings LLC? The courtroom went still. Victor Crane's head lifted sharply. Judge Ortiz's eyes narrowed again, this time not with impatience, with focus. Ethan's confidence didn't break yet. It cracked. I don't know what that is. Claire nodded, like she expected that answer too. You don't know because you never asked, you never looked, you just accepted. She turned slightly toward the gallery, voice still directed at the court. And to everyone watching, if you've ever been told you're nothing because you're quiet, go ahead and tap like right now. Because silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. And if you're enjoying this story so far, subscribe, because what's coming next is the moment the room changes. Claire turned back to Ethan. Mr. Hart, did you ever ask where the mortgage payments came from during the months when your accounts were overdrafted? Ethan's face tightened. My accounts were not... Claire lifted another document. Do you want to deny this statement? Ethan's attorney stood abruptly. Objection, Your Honor. Foundation. Judge Ortiz held up a hand. Overruled. The document speaks to financial context. Mr. Hart will answer. Ethan swallowed. It was the first time anyone in the room saw him do it. His voice was quieter. I don't recall overdrafts. Claire's eyes locked on his. You don't recall because you weren't the one fixing them. And that's when Ethan's laughter stopped. Because the courtroom could feel it now. Claire wasn't guessing. She was leading. Judge Ortiz leaned forward. Mrs. Hart, do you intend to call a witness regarding these payments? Claire nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Victor Crane rose quickly. Your Honor, we object to surprise witnesses. Judge Ortiz's gaze didn't waver. In family court, evidentiary surprises happen when one party assumes the other has nothing. Proceed, Mrs. Hart. The door to courtroom 4B opened, and a woman stepped in with a careful professionalism. Mid-40s, sharp eyes, a folder tucked under her arm like it contained someone's fate. She walked to the front and introduced herself. Denise Klein, mortgage servicing manager for Brookhaven Lending. Claire's voice was controlled but firm. Ms. Klein, are you familiar with the mortgage for 18 Wisteria Ridge? Denise nodded. Yes, I oversee the servicing records. Claire asked, can you tell the court based on your records who has been making payments on that mortgage? Denise opened her folder and read clearly. For the last 6 years and 8 months, the mortgage payments have been made from an account registered to Larkspur Holdings, LLC. A sound passed through the gallery, like wind through dry leaves. Ethan's face tightened. That's not possible. Judge Ortiz looked at Denise. Ms. Klein, are you certain? Denise nodded without hesitation. Yes, Your Honor. The payer ID, routing source, and confirmation references match Larkspur Holdings, LLC on every payment. Victor Crane stepped forward. Your Honor, LLCs can be used by anyone. This proves nothing about Mrs. Hart. Claire spoke calmly. Ms. Klein, does your record show who authorized Larkspur Holdings to make payments? Denise flipped to another page. Yes, the authorization form was submitted by the account owner, along with identity verification. Claire's voice didn't shake. And who is the account owner? Denise looked up. Claire Hart. The entire courtroom froze. Ethan stared like the world had tilted. Victor Crane's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Judge Ortiz's eyes sharpened into something that wasn't just interest anymore. It was recognition. Recognition of a lie unraveling in real time. Ethan's voice cracked with disbelief. That's not true. She doesn't have money. Claire didn't look at him. She looked at the judge. Your Honor, may the witness submit the authorization form and payer verification. Denise stepped forward and handed documents to the clerk. Ethan shook his head, laughing again, but this time it wasn't arrogant. It was frantic. This is insane. She's trying to pull some kind of stunt. Judge Ortiz's voice was firm. Mr. Hart, sit down. Victor Crane tried to recover. Your Honor, even if Mrs. Hart made payments, it could be considered marital contribution. Claire cut in gently. Then let's talk about why I made them. Denise's eyes stayed on her paperwork. Professional, impartial. Claire asked, Ms. Klein, do your records show any period where the mortgage was at risk of default? Denise nodded. Yes, 7 notices over a 2-year span. The account was repeatedly brought current after missed payments. Claire turned slightly, voice low but clear. And do those missed payments correspond to times when Mr. Hart claims he was paying? Denise hesitated, then answered honestly, yes, the missed payments were followed by lump sum catch-up payments from Larkspur Holdings. Claire faced Ethan at last. Her eyes were steady. You told this court you paid the mortgage. Ethan's lips parted, but nothing came out. Claire's voice softened, almost sad. You didn't even pay for the roof you slept under. And in that moment, the courtroom's loyalty shifted. You could feel it. Because humiliation is only funny when the victim stays silent. Claire wasn't silent anymore. Victor Crane tried to stand again, but his confidence had changed. He wasn't performing now, he was patching a sinking ship. Your Honor, he said, we need to examine the nature of Larkspur Holdings. If Mrs. Hart is hiding assets, Judge Ortiz lifted a hand. We will examine everything, one at a time. Claire spoke before Crane could regain control. Your Honor, I have one additional witness. The bailiff called the name, and a man walked in wearing a modest suit carrying a slim briefcase. He looked like someone who lived in numbers and slept in spreadsheets. He introduced himself. Raymond Cho, forensic accountant. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Are you kidding me? Claire's voice was calm. Mr. Cho reviewed the financial records from our joint accounts and Mr. Hart's business expenditures. Victor Crane objected immediately. Your Honor, discovery... Judge Ortiz cut him off. Mr. Crane, if your client's position was that Mrs. Hart had nothing to bring, you cannot now complain that she brought something. Raymond Cho testified with precision. No drama, just facts, which somehow felt sharper than any insult. Over the past 5 years, Cho said, Mr. Hart's personal accounts show significant withdrawals, and transfers inconsistent with mortgage payments. Ethan scoffed. "That's my money." Cho continued. "During months where the mortgage was delinquent, the records show Mr. Hart spent substantial sums on luxury travel, jewelry purchases, and repeated payments to a private membership club." The gallery murmured again. A reporter's pen started moving faster. Claire asked, "Mr. Cho, were there any recurring transfers to an individual not disclosed in marital finances?" Cho nodded. "Yes, a recurring transfer labeled consulting to a private account. The total over 3 years exceeds $212,000. Ethan's face went pale. "That's business." Claire's voice stayed steady. "Whose account is it?" Cho looked down, then up. "The account belongs to an Ava Mercer." A ripple of recognition passed through the room. Some people had heard the name before, whispered in town like gossip with teeth. Ethan's attorney's voice tightened. "Objection, relevance." Judge Ortiz's voice was cold. "Overruled. This goes to credibility and financial conduct." Claire looked at Ethan. "Ava Mercer," she repeated softly, "your consultant." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Don't do this here." Claire's eyes didn't blink. "You did it everywhere." Cho continued. "Additionally, Mr. Hart submitted a statement claiming his account funded the mortgage. However, the same period shows those funds were redirected to non-marital expenditures. The mortgage remained current only because of payments from Larkspur Holdings." Judge Ortiz's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Hart," she said, "you testified under oath that you paid the mortgage." Ethan swallowed hard. "I believed I did." Judge Ortiz's tone sharpened. "Belief is not evidence. This court does not tolerate perjury." Victor Crane spoke quickly, voice tight. "Your Honor, my client did not intend." Claire stepped in quietly, holding up a final document. "Your Honor, there's more." Judge Ortiz looked at her. "Proceed." Claire's voice was controlled. 3 years ago, Mr. Hart refinanced the mortgage. Ms. Klein's records show the authorization included my signature. Ethan's eyes widened. Claire's voice dropped. "Except I never signed it." The room went dead silent. Denise Klein flipped through her file, then nodded slowly. "There is a refinance packet with Mrs. Hart's signature on file." Claire looked at the judge, eyes steady. "That signature is forged." Ethan's voice rose in panic. "That's a lie!" Judge Ortiz's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order!" The judge's eyes locked onto Ethan. "Mr. Hart, if this court determines you forged documents, that is not merely a family court issue." Ethan looked like he'd been slapped by reality. And Claire, still calm, finally let the truth show in her voice. "I didn't come here for alimony," she said. "I came here for the truth." Victor Crane tried to regain ground by attacking Claire. "Mrs. Hart," he said, turning toward her, "if you had the resources to create an LLC and pay a mortgage for years, why present yourself as financially vulnerable today? Why sit without counsel?" Claire's answer was quiet. "Because money isn't what this was about." Crane scoffed. "It's always about money." Claire's eyes sharpened. "Not for me." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, may I explain Larkspur Holdings?" Judge Ortiz nodded slowly. "Go ahead." Claire took a breath. "Larkspur Holdings is not a business built during the marriage. It is a legal vehicle tied to an inheritance from my grandmother, established before I married Mr. Hart." Victor Crane seized on it. "So you admit you hid assets?" Claire looked at him calmly. "No, I disclosed the trust in our tax filings. Mr. Hart knew it existed." Ethan's voice burst out defensive. "You never told me you were paying my mortgage." Claire finally turned fully toward him. "Because the first time I told you about the trust, you asked me how fast you could access it." A murmur swept through the gallery. Disgust, realization, shock. Claire's voice stayed level. "When we bought the house, your credit was in trouble. You were too proud to tell anyone you'd missed payments on your early business loans. The bank wouldn't approve you." Ethan's face tightened. That's not..." Claire spoke over him, not louder, just steadier. "So I used my inheritance to secure the mortgage through Larkspur. I did it so we could have a home, so you could still look like the provider you wanted to be." She paused, and the courtroom leaned into the silence. "I let you take the credit," she said, "because I thought that's what love looked like." Ethan's eyes flashed with anger and fear. "You're twisting this." Claire's voice hardened. "You twisted it when you told this court you paid for everything." Victor Crane tried to pivot. "Even if Mrs. Hart contributed, she did so voluntarily." Claire nodded. "Yes, I volunteered to save our home when he missed payments." She looked at Judge Ortiz. "I also volunteered to cover bills when he drained our joint account." Ethan snapped. I didn't drain anything. Claire's expression didn't change. Then you won't mind if the court reviews the transfers to Ava Mercer. Ethan's face went rigid. Claire's voice softened again, and it cut deeper because of it. I found out about Ava the same day I found a foreclosure notice in the mail. She let that sit, betrayal stacked on betrayal. I held that notice in my hand, she said, and I realized something. While I was paying to keep our home, he was paying to build a life with someone else. The gallery shifted, uncomfortable in the presence of raw truth. Claire continued, so I kept paying quietly, not because I wanted him, because I refused to let my future be destroyed by his pride. Victor Crane's voice turned sharp. Then why refuse alimony today? Claire looked at him. Because alimony would make it sound like I needed him. She turned toward Ethan, eyes steady, voice low. I never did. And for the first time, Ethan couldn't laugh, because he finally understood what was happening. This wasn't Claire begging the court for scraps. This was Claire pulling the mask off the man who'd been living under her protection and calling it his success. Victor Crane's closing argument was shorter than he wanted it to be. He couldn't perform around documents that didn't lie. Your Honor, he said, marital assets are complex. Even if Mrs. Hart contributed through a trust, the home served the marriage. Judge Ortiz stopped him with a look. Mr. Crane, the issue is not merely contribution, it's credibility. It's sworn testimony. It's the possibility of forged documents. Crane swallowed. We ask the court for fairness. Then Claire stood for her closing, alone at the table, shoulders straight. Your Honor, she began, I refused alimony because I didn't want my life defined by what he gives me. She looked toward Ethan, not with hatred but with clarity. He told the court I am nothing without him. She turned back to the judge. But the truth is he built his image on my silence. Claire's voice tightened. Not breaking, just sharpening. I paid that mortgage because I believed in the marriage. I believed in him. And when he betrayed me, he didn't just cheat. He tried to erase me. The courtroom stayed still, listening like the room itself was holding its breath. I'm not asking this court to punish him out of bitterness, Claire said. I'm asking this court to correct the record, to acknowledge what is true. Judge Ortiz sat back, eyes on the evidence, then on Ethan. Mr. Hart, she said, you testified that you paid the mortgage. Evidence contradicts that. You submitted financial statements suggesting you funded the home. Evidence contradicts that. And now we have a claim of a forged signature on refinancing documents that will be referred for investigation. Ethan's attorney jumped in. Your Honor! Judge Ortiz raised a hand. Enough! The judge looked at Claire. Mrs. Hart, you have demonstrated that Larkspur Holdings, your premarital inheritance vehicle, made the payments that preserved the marital home. The court recognizes this as separate property contribution, not a marital gift. Ethan's face drained of color. Judge Ortiz continued. Given the evidence of Mr. Hart's misrepresentation and financial misconduct, the court awards the marital home interest to Mrs. Hart, subject to the structure of the trust and the mortgage agreement. Mr. Hart will vacate the property within 30 days. A gasp ran through the gallery. Ethan's voice cracked. That's my house! Judge Ortiz's gaze was ice. No, Mr. Hart, that was your stage. Mrs. Hart paid for the foundation. The judge went on, each word landing with finality. Mr. Hart will reimburse Mrs. Hart for mortgage payments made during periods where his accounts were delinquent, while he diverted marital funds to non-marital expenditures. He will also cover attorney fees related to forensic accounting and document review. Victor Crane's face tightened. Your Honor, Judge Ortiz cut him off. This court does not reward deceit. Ethan sat frozen, like the world had shifted and he hadn't been told the new rules. Claire didn't smile, she didn't gloat. She simply exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath for years. Judge Ortiz's final words were quiet, but they echoed. Mrs. Hart, you refused alimony because you were never the dependent party here. And for the first time in the entire proceeding, the courtroom looked at Claire not as a victim, but as the person who had been in control all along. Outside the courthouse, the winter air felt sharper, cleaner, like the world was finally telling the truth. Claire walked down the steps alone, but not lonely. There's a difference. Lonely is when you're abandoned. Claire had been abandoned years ago, emotionally, quietly, while still married. Today she was simply alone because she chose it. Behind her, Ethan burst through the doors, furious, voice raised into the cold air. Claire, you can't do this. She didn't turn immediately. She kept walking, each step measured like a heartbeat. He caught up, grabbing her arm. "You think you're some hero, you think you won." Claire stopped and gently removed his hand from her sleeve. No struggle, no drama, just finality. "I didn't win," she said. "I stopped losing." Ethan's face twisted. "You humiliated me." Claire's eyes held his. "No, you humiliated yourself. I just stopped covering for you." He looked at her like he still couldn't understand how the woman he dismissed had just rewritten his story in public. "What are you going to do now?" he demanded. "Live off your trust, pretend you're better than me?" Claire's voice was calm, but it carried weight. "I'm going to live without fear, and I'm going to make sure the next woman you meet knows to check the mortgage statements." Ethan flinched like she'd slapped him. Claire took one last look at him, not with love, not with hate, just with the clear-eyed truth he never bothered to learn. Then she walked away. Weeks later, the story spread through town in a way Ethan couldn't control. Not gossip, truth. The developer who bragged about providing was exposed as the man whose home had been protected by the wife he mocked. The consultant transfers became a scandal. Investors asked questions, clients hesitated. And Claire. Claire returned to her clinic, not as a woman begging to survive, but as a woman who had finally reclaimed her name. She didn't change who she was. She just stopped shrinking so other people could feel large. And if you've ever been told you're nothing because you're quiet, because you're kind, because you don't shout, remember this: kindness isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the strength that holds up an entire house until you decide to let it go. If you want more intense courtroom stories where the underdog flips the entire room, make sure you like this video, subscribe, and drop a comment with what you think Ethan deserved after that verdict. Should the judge have gone even harder? Because in courtroom 4B, one thing became clear. He laughed when she refused alimony, until she revealed she'd been paying his mortgage for years. And that laughter, it never came back.